I'm just trying to make a point as where do you define what an emergency is, and abuse that we've seen in the past year, not once but twice, regarding homelessness. So this bill is designed to address that problem. And it's crafted, I think, to protect the public. And I think what we've heard in terms of arguments so far is taking the argument to the extreme. That's not what's going to occur here. What we are concerned about, Mr. Speaker, is when an emergency is declared, the procurement laws no longer apply. Those laws are finally crafted to protect the public, And we want to make sure that if an emergency is declared, it is truly an emergency, and the procurement laws then can be overlooked. But things like homelessness, that's not a reason to get around the procurement laws. And how do we know what kind of abuse, if there is any abuse? We won't know. And therefore, we're trying to address that situation. I hope people will support this measure. I think it's good government. It has nothing to do with a takeaway. And in fact, if it does, if someone wants to argue that, it's a takeaway by the executive branch from the legislative branch. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I'm personally offended by those comments. I've opposed the bill, Mr. Speaker.
Please proceed.
And I'm personally offended by comments that say that homelessness is not an emergency. That speaker has a roof over his head, a very nice roof up in Manoa. There are people out there on the street. There were people that were evicted by the mayor out of the city park. The governor stepped forward and gave those people a temporary shelter, calling it the next step, so they didn't feel so degraded by the experience of being homeless without any place to go. I've been down to the next step a number of times. I saw the people that came out and volunteered their time to set that up so the people would have a place to stay, so the children wouldn't be out there without any shelter whatsoever. I saw the people that really cared, that stepped forward in this emergency. Being homeless is an emergency. That's the most heartless comment that I have ever heard in this chamber, that homelessness is not an emergency. Mr. Speaker, our governor stepped forward and did something that gave people dignity. It gave the volunteers that stepped in to help create the shelter, to help feed the people, to come down and give parties for the children. And the people that were there participating in that gave such aloha to the families and the individuals in that homeless shelter. Homelessness is an emergency, and we have a governor that recognized that and stepped forward and acted. Now, when our side of the island, Mr. Speaker, gets a hurricane, or I hope not, but possibly a tsunami, I don't want to say to our governor, sorry, you have to sort of look around and declare that this looks like an emergency and then say, call the legislature back into session. Well, those of us that have been subject to the tsunami or the hurricane would be pretty unlikely to be able to show up here because we'd be in our communities trying to help people with that emergency. This is the most mean-spirited, wrongly devised bill that will hurt our people, and I hope I never, ever hear anyone in this chamber again say that homelessness is not an emergency. Go out there and be with them and see what that's like and tell me that that's not an emergency in those people's lives. I think this was disgraceful. Disgraceful, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Blake Hushero.